At 38, Zachary cut an impressive figure, tall, with salt and pepper hair that belied his age, and piercing blue eyes that could read the skies as easily as they could read people. Today, those eyes were weary from travel, but alert with anticipation. He had left the climate conference early, driven by an urgency that went beyond professional duty. The Category 5 hurricane barreling towards the coast demanded his attention, but it was the promise of home, of Lucinda, that quickened his step as he approached the front door. Something made him pause. A car was parked on the street, just a few houses down. He recognized it immediately, Morris's sleek black sedan. His brother's presence wasn't unusual. Maurice often dropped by to check on Lucinda when Zachary was away. But today, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of Zachary's stomach. Quietly, he inserted his key into the lock, turning it with the precision of someone used to handling delicate instruments. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Zachary's footsteps were muffled by the plush carpet as he made his way up the stairs, his heart beginning to race for reasons he couldn't quite articulate. As he reached the top of the stairs, a sound caught his attention. It was coming from the bedroom, their bedroom. Soft voices, punctuated by occasional laughter. Zachary's breath caught in his throat as he approached the partially open door. Through the crack, he saw them. Lucinda, her golden hair splayed across the pillows, and Maurice, his brother, leaning over her with a familiarity that made Zachary's blood run cold. They were fully clothed, but the intimacy of their position was unmistakable. "Zachary is a fool." Lucinda's voice drifted through the gap, clear and cutting. "Always working for others and saving lives. That gives us a lot of time to spend together." Morris's laugh was low and conspiratorial. "He's been the same since childhood. A responsible kid, but a woman like you doesn't like that. So I'm here for you." Their shared laughter felt like a physical blow to Zachary. His mind reeled, struggling to process the scene before him. The woman he loved, the brother he trusted, both betraying him in the most intimate way possible. For a moment, rage threatened to overwhelm him. He wanted to burst through the door, to confront them, to demand answers. But years of dealing with unpredictable storms had taught Zachary the value of calm in the face of chaos. Instead, he reached for his phone, his hands steady despite the turmoil inside him. With practiced ease, he activated the recording function, capturing their conversation. Evidence, he told himself, though for what purpose, he wasn't yet sure. As Lucinda and Maurice continued their intimate discussion, oblivious to his presence, Zachary retreated silently down the stairs. He made it to his car without incident, sliding into the driver's seat on autopilot. As he started the engine, his professional instincts kicked in. The hurricane. He needed to focus on the approaching storm. It was a lifeline, a purpose to cling to when everything else seemed to be crumbling around him. The drive to his office at the weather center was a blur. Zachary's mind oscillated between replaying the scene he had witnessed and forcing himself to concentrate on the meteorological data he would need to review. The betrayal burned in his chest, but the responsibility he felt towards his work, towards the lives that depended on his expertise, provided a counterbalance to his personal turmoil. As the weather center came into view, Zachary took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. The hurricane wouldn't wait for his personal life to sort itself out. Lives were at stake, and he had a job to do. With a final, painful thought of Lucinda and Maurice, Zachary locked away his emotions and stepped out of the car, ready to face the approaching storm, both literal and metaphorical. The weather center hummed with activity as Zachary strode through the doors. Screens flickered with satellite imagery, and the air was thick with tension. Colleagues hurried past, their faces etched with concern. But for Zachary, the chaos was a welcome distraction from the storm raging in his own mind. He made his way to his workstation, fingers flying over the keyboard as he pulled up the latest data on the hurricane. The numbers were staggering, unlike anything he had seen in his career. Wind speeds, barometric pressure, size, all pointed to a monster of a storm. "Zach, you okay? You seem off." The voice startled him. Zachary looked up to see Cassie, his longtime colleague and friend, peering at him with concern. Her dark eyes, usually alight with enthusiasm, now held a hint of worry. For a moment, Zachary considered telling her everything. Cassie had always been a good listener, a voice of reason in turbulent times. But the words stuck in his throat. How could he explain the betrayal he had witnessed just hours ago? "I'm fine," he deflected, gesturing towards the radar display. "This storm's unprecedented. We need to warn people." Cassie followed his gaze, her own eyes widening as she took in the data. "My God," she whispered. "I've never seen anything like this." Together, they immersed themselves in the work, analyzing wind patterns, predicting storm surges, and preparing for the emergency broadcast that would need to go out soon. As they worked, Zachary's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Messages from Lucinda, asking about his return. Each vibration felt like a fresh betrayal, but he forced himself to ignore them. The storm demanded his full attention. As the hours ticked by, the hurricane drew closer, its massive eye clearly visible on the satellite imagery. The tension in the weather center ratcheted up with each passing minute. Meteorologists huddled around screens, emergency coordinators barked orders into phones, and through it all, Zachary remained a calm center, his personal turmoil hidden behind a mask of professional focus. Suddenly, the door to the main room burst open. The institute director, a tall man with a shock of white hair, strode in, his face grave. "We're evacuating," he announced, his voice cutting through the chatter. "This hurricane's off the charts. We need to get to a safer location." A flurry of activity erupted as people began gathering essential equipment and data backups. But Zachary remained seated, his eyes fixed on the screens before him. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. "I'm staying," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Someone needs to monitor this beast." The director turned to him, surprise and concern warring on his face. "Zachary, that's not necessary. We have remote systems." "With all due respect, sir," Zachary interrupted, "those systems can fail. We need eyes on the ground. I can provide crucial real-time data to the emergency services." For a long moment, the director held Zachary's gaze, searching for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "All right," he conceded. "But at the first sign of danger, you evacuate." "Understood?" Zachary nodded, turning back to his screens as the room emptied around him. As the last of his colleagues filed out, casting worried glances his way, Zachary felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. Here, in the face of one of nature's most powerful forces, the betrayal he had witnessed seemed almost small. But as the wind began to howl outside and the first bands of rain lashed against the windows, Zachary knew that both storms, the one raging outside and the one in his heart, were far from over. The true test was yet to come. As night fell, the full fury of the hurricane descended upon the coast. Wind screamed around the weather center, a banshee's wail that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Rain lashed against the windows in horizontal sheets, reducing visibility to near zero. But inside, illuminated by the glow of computer screens, Zachary Thompson worked tirelessly, a lone sentinel against the storm. His fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting data, running models, and sending out crucial updates to emergency services. Every few minutes, his calm voice would break through the static on emergency channels, providing life-saving information to rescue teams battling the elements. "The eye wall is approaching your position," he warned a Coast Guard team attempting a daring rescue at sea. "Expect wind speeds to increase dramatically in the next 10 minutes. Abort if necessary." As he worked, Zachary's phone buzzed incessantly. Messages from Lucinda and Maurice, their tones growing increasingly panicked as the storm intensified. For hours, he had ignored them, focusing solely on his work. But as a particularly desperate plea came through, he found himself reaching for the device. "Zach, please," Lucinda's message read. "We're trapped. The streets flooded. We don't know what to do." For a moment, Zachary's hand hovered over the keyboard, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within him. Part of him wanted to ignore their pleas, to let them face the consequences of their actions. But the larger part, the part that had dedicated his life to saving others, couldn't bring himself to abandon them, regardless of their betrayal. With a deep breath, he dialed Lucinda's number. When she answered, her voice was thick with tears and fear. "Zachary." Thank God. We need help. The water's rising and— Listen carefully, Zachary interrupted, his voice calm and steady. Take whatever food and water you can carry. Move to the highest point in the house, the attic if you have one. Stay away from windows. I'll make sure rescue teams know your location. Zach, I'm so sorry, Lucinda began, but Zachary cut her off. This isn't the time, he said firmly. Focus on staying safe. I'll send help when I can. He ended the call. Anger at their betrayal still simmered beneath the surface, but it was tempered by a professional determination to ensure their safety. He quickly relayed their location to the nearest rescue team, then turned his attention back to the wider crisis at hand. Throughout the night, Zachary coordinated with rescue teams across the state. His intimate knowledge of the storm's behavior proved invaluable, allowing him to guide efforts with uncanny precision. Lives were saved because of his expertise, his calm demeanor a beacon of hope in the chaos of the storm. As dawn approached and the eye of the hurricane passed over the weather center, an eerie calm descended. Zachary knew it was temporary. The back end of the storm would soon hit with renewed fury. But in this brief respite, he received a distress call that he couldn't ignore. A family was stranded nearby, their car submerged in floodwaters. Rescue teams were stretched thin, and no one was close enough to reach them before the second half of the storm hit. Without hesitation, Zachary made a decision that would cement his reputation as a hero. Donning a fluorescent weatherproof jacket, he stepped out into the deceptive calm of the hurricane's eye. The scene that greeted him was one of utter devastation. Trees were uprooted, cars overturned, and debris littered the flooded streets. But Zachary pressed on, wading through knee-deep water towards the stranded family. He found them huddled on the roof of their car, 2 adults and 3 young children, terror etched on their faces. With gentle reassurance and steady hands, Zachary helped them down, leading them through the treacherous waters back to the relative safety of the weather center. As they reached the building, the wind began to pick up again. The eye wall was closing in, bringing with it the second onslaught of the hurricane. Zachary ushered the family inside, just as the full fury of the storm descended once more. For the remainder of the hurricane, Zachary continued his tireless work, guiding rescue efforts and providing crucial updates. When the storm finally passed, leaving behind a landscape forever altered, the true extent of Zachary's actions came to light. His decision to stay behind, his expert guidance throughout the night, and his personal rescue of the stranded family had saved countless lives. As dawn broke on a changed world, Zachary Thompson emerged as a hero, his personal turmoil masked by his professional triumph. But as he stood at the window, watching the first tentative rays of sunlight pierce the dissipating clouds, Zachary knew that while the meteorological storm had passed, the storm in his personal life was far from over. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for the confrontation to come, knowing that the true test of his strength lay not in facing down hurricanes, but in confronting the betrayal that awaited him at home. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Zachary Thompson pulled into his driveway. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the aftermath of the hurricane evident in the scattered debris and fallen trees. As he stepped out of his car, exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders, but a steely resolve burned in his eyes. The front door creaked open, revealing a disheveled Lucinda and Maurice. They stood in the entryway, feigning relief at his return, but Zachary could see the guilt etched in their features. The facade of innocence they attempted to maintain only fueled the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Zach," Lucinda exclaimed, her voice trembling slightly. "We were so worried. The storm was terrible, and we couldn't reach you." "Save it," Zachary interrupted, his tone cold and measured. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the tense silence. Maurice stepped forward, a forced smile on his face. "Brother, thank God you're safe." "How long?" Zachary asked, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of fury. The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Lucinda paled, her carefully constructed mask of concern crumbling. "Zach, it's not what you think." "Don't lie," Zachary interrupted, his blue eyes flashing with a mixture of pain and anger. "I saw you. Both of you." The color drained from Morris's face as the realization dawned on him. Brother, I can explain. Save it. Zachary cut him off, his voice sharp as a knife's edge. I trusted you both. That trust is gone. Lucinda, her composure faltering, attempted to shift the blame. Zach, you're always away. Your long hours, your frequent work trips. What did you expect? I was lonely, and Maurice was here. So you decided to betray me with my own brother? Zachary's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. Is that supposed to justify your actions? Maurice stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Brother, please. It was a moment of weakness. We never meant to hurt you. A moment. Zachary's eyebrow arched skeptically. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. With a few taps, the recorded conversation from that fateful day filled the room. Lucinda's voice, tinny but unmistakable, echoed in the tense silence. Zachary is a fool, always working for others and saving lives. That gives us a lot of time to spend together. Morris's response followed. He's been the same since childhood. A responsible kid, but a woman like you doesn't like that. So I'm here for you. Their laughter, once shared in secret, now exposed, seemed to physically pain them as they listened. Lucinda's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes, while Maurice looked as if he might be sick. Zachary stopped the recording, his face a mask of controlled fury. A moment of weakness? This sounds like a well-established affair to me. Lucinda stepped forward, reaching out to him. Zach, please. We can work through this. I love you. Love? Zachary recoiled from her touch. You have a funny way of showing it, Lucinda. Maurice, his face a picture of desperation, tried once more. Brother, we made a terrible mistake, but we're family. Surely we can find a way to move past this. Family. Zachary's laugh was hollow. You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, Maurice. With deliberate calmness, Zachary reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. And Maurice, you're fired from the family business. The words hit them like physical blows. Lucinda stumbled back, her legs giving way as she collapsed onto the couch. Maurice stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Zach, you can't mean that, Lucinda whispered, her voice barely audible. I've never been more serious in my life, Zachary replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. You've made your choices. Now you'll both face the consequences. As he turned to leave, Maurice made one last desperate attempt. Zachary, please. The business. It's my life's work too. You can't just. I can, and I have. Zachary cut him off. You should have thought about that before you decided to betray your own brother. With those final words, Zachary walked out of the house, leaving behind a shattered Lucinda and a stunned Maurice. As he got into his car, he could hear Lucinda's sobs through the open window, but he steeled himself against the sound. The storm might have passed, but for Zachary Thompson, the real tempest was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, as the coastal town slowly rebuilt itself in the wake of the hurricane, Zachary Thompson found himself navigating a different kind of devastation. The divorce proceedings had begun, turning his once peaceful life into a battlefield of legal negotiations and emotional turmoil. Sitting in the office of his private investigator, Jack Reeves, Zachary braced himself for more bad news. Jack, a grizzled ex-cop with a reputation for uncovering even the most deeply buried secrets, wore an expression as he spread out a series of documents on his desk. I'm sorry, Zachary, Jack began, his gravelly voice tinged with genuine sympathy. What I've uncovered. It's worse than we initially thought. Zachary leaned forward, his face a mask of stoic determination. Tell me everything, Jack. I need to know the full extent of their deceit. Jack nodded, pushing forward a thick folder. Maurice and Lucinda. They've been embezzling from the family business for years. The revelation hit Zachary like a physical blow. He had suspected financial impropriety, but the scale of the betrayal was staggering. How much? He managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Millions, Jack replied, his tone firm. They've been siphoning off funds through a series of shell companies. It's sophisticated stuff. They must have had help. Zachary's mind reeled. The family business, built by his grandfather and nurtured by generations, had been his pride and joy. To think that his own brother and wife had been systematically looting it for years, the betrayal cut deep. But Jack wasn't finished. With a hesitant glance at Zachary, he pushed forward another document. "There's more," he said softly, "and I'm afraid this might be even harder to hear." Zachary steeled himself. "What is it?" "During my investigation, I uncovered some discrepancies regarding your daughter, Christy." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Christy? What about her? Jack's eyes were filled with compassion as he delivered the blow. "There's significant doubt about her paternity, Zachary. The timing, it aligns more with the beginning of Lucinda and Morris's affair than with your marriage." For a moment, Zachary couldn't breathe. Christy, his beautiful, intelligent 14-year-old daughter, the light of his life. Could she really not be his? "I need to know for sure," Zachary said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Jack nodded, understanding the unspoken request. "I can arrange for a discreet paternity test. We'll have the results within a week." The next 7 days were a blur for Zachary. He went through the motions of his daily life, attending meetings at the weather center, participating in the ongoing hurricane recovery efforts, but his mind was constantly elsewhere. Every time he looked at Christie's picture on his desk, a fresh wave of pain and uncertainty washed over him. When Jack called to inform him that the results were in, Zachary felt a mix of dread and desperate need for closure. Sitting once again in the private investigator's office, he braced himself for the truth. Jack slid an envelope across the desk, his expression somber. "I'm sorry, Zachary. The test confirms it. Christy, she's not your biological daughter." The world seemed to fall away. Zachary sat in stunned silence, the weight of this final betrayal threatening to crush him. Christy, the child he had loved unconditionally for 14 years, the girl he had taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, comforted after nightmares. She wasn't his. As the initial shock began to subside, a cold resolve settled over Zachary. He looked up at Jack, his eyes hardening with determination. "Thank you for your thoroughness, Jack. I need you to compile all of this information. The embezzlement, the affair, the paternity test results. Everything." Jack nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're going to use this in the divorce proceedings?" "Yes," Zachary confirmed, his voice steady. "But not just that. I have a plan, and I'll need your discretion." Leaving Jack's office, Zachary made his way to meet with his lawyer, Arthur Blackwood. The distinguished attorney's office was a stark contrast to Jack's utilitarian space, all polished wood and leather-bound law books. Arthur listened intently as Zachary laid out the evidence, his expression growing increasingly grave. "They've stolen millions," Arthur explained, shaking his head in disbelief. "And with the paternity results, you have an incredibly strong case, Zachary. We could destroy them in court." Zachary nodded. "Prepare everything, Arthur. They won't see this coming." But as Arthur began to outline their legal strategy, Zachary held up a hand. "There's more, Arthur. I have a plan, and I need your complete discretion and cooperation." Over the next hour, Zachary outlined his intentions. He explained his plan to disappear, to start a new life away from the betrayal and pain that now tainted every aspect of his existence. "I'm giving you full authority to destroy Lucinda and Maurice in court," Zachary said, his voice firm. "But I won't be here to see it. I need you to handle everything, including the distribution of any settlement to charity." Arthur listened, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Zachary, are you sure about this? It's an extreme step." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Zachary interrupted. "Can I count on you, Arthur?" After a moment's hesitation, Arthur nodded. "You have my word. I'll handle everything according to your wishes." With that settled, Zachary made one final call. Joshua Reeves, his old friend and trusted confidant, agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. As they sat across from each other, steaming cups of coffee between them, Zachary laid out his request. "Joshua, I need you to take over the family business after I'm gone. You're the only one I trust to set things right." Joshua's eyes widened in shock. Gone? Zach, what are you planning? Zachary gave his friend a sad smile. The less you know, the better, Josh. But I need to know the business will be in good hands. Will you do this for me? After a long moment, Joshua nodded, reaching out to clasp Zachary's hand. You can count on me, Zach. Always. As Zachary left the cafe, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The pieces were in place. Now, all that remained was to set his plan in motion and leave behind the shattered remains of his old life. In the days that followed, Zachary Thompson threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. To the outside world, it appeared as though he was channeling his personal turmoil into his professional life. His colleagues at the Weather Center marveled at his focus, his ability to predict and analyze weather patterns with even greater accuracy than before. But beneath this facade of normalcy, Zachary was meticulously planning his disappearance. His expertise in weather patterns and emergency protocols, honed over years of studying and predicting natural disasters, now served a different purpose. He was crafting the perfect storm, not of wind and rain, but of circumstances that would allow him to vanish without a trace. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of betrayal seemed to press in from all sides, Zachary sat at his computer, carefully liquidating his assets. With practiced ease, he transferred funds to untraceable accounts, setting up a financial safety net for his new life. Each transaction was a step further away from the life he had known, from the family that had betrayed him. As he worked, Zachary's mind occasionally drifted to Christy. The knowledge that she wasn't his biological daughter still stung, a constant ache in his chest. But as he looked at her picture on his desk, he realized that his love for her hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown, tempered by the pain of betrayal into something fierce and protective. He would make sure she was taken care of, even if she never knew the truth of his sacrifice. With his financial preparations in place, Zachary turned his attention to creating a false trail. He booked flights to various locations, made reservations at hotels he would never visit, and left breadcrumbs of a planned trip that existed only in digital form. To anyone investigating his disappearance later, it would appear as though he had been planning a solo journey to clear his head after the turmoil of recent events. As the day of the crucial court hearing approached, Zachary monitored the weather with an intensity that surpassed even his usual dedication. He had chosen this day carefully, knowing that a severe storm system was predicted to hit the coast. It wasn't a hurricane this time, but a powerful nor'easter that promised to bring chaos to the region. The morning of the hearing dawned dark and ominous. Rain lashed against the windows, driven by howling winds that seemed to mirror the turmoil in Zachary's heart. As he dressed in a somber suit, preparing for what the world believed would be his appearance in court, he allowed himself one last moment of reflection. He thought of Lucinda, of the love they had once shared and the bitter ashes it had become. He thought of Maurice, his brother, and the years of trust shattered by betrayal. And he thought of Christy, the innocent caught in the middle of this web of deceit. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he doing the right thing? But as a clap of thunder shook the house, Zachary's resolve hardened. He had made his decision. There was no turning back now. Instead of heading to the courthouse, Zachary drove to a predetermined location on the outskirts of town. The storm raged around him, providing the perfect cover for his disappearance. He parked his car near the shore, leaving behind a carefully crafted scene that suggested he had been swept away by the storm surge. As search efforts began, hampered by the severe weather, Zachary was already miles away. He had slipped away in the chaos, using his knowledge of the storm's patterns to navigate safely out of the area. The evidence he left behind, his waterlogged cell phone, a torn piece of his suit jacket caught on some rocks, would suggest a tragic accident. Days turned into weeks as the search continued. Zachary, now far from the life he had known, watched from afar as the story unfolded. News reports spoke of the respected meteorologist presumed lost at sea, a tragic victim of the very forces he had spent his life studying. He saw Lucinda's tear-stained face on television, pleading for any information on his whereabouts. He watched as Maurice, looking haggard and guilt-ridden, joined the search efforts. But even as the public drama played out, Zachary knew that behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. Arthur would be presenting the evidence of Lucinda and Morris's betrayal in court. The embezzlement, the affair, the paternity test results, all would come to light. And in Zachary's absence, there would be no one to mitigate the consequences of their actions. As the storm finally cleared, both literally and figuratively, Zachary stood on the deck of a ship bound for distant shores. He looked back at the receding coastline, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was pain, yes, and a deep sense of loss. But there was also a glimmer of hope, a feeling of freedom that grew stronger with each nautical mile that separated him from his past. Lucinda and Maurice were left to face the consequences of their actions, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. And Zachary Thompson, once a fixture of their lives, was now nothing more than a ghost, a memory fading like storm clouds on the horizon. As the last glimpse of familiar shores disappeared from view, Zachary turned his face to the open sea. The future stretched out before him, unknown and uncertain, but free from the betrayal that had shattered his world. With a deep breath of salty air, he stepped forward into his new life, leaving behind the man he once was and embracing the chance to rewrite his own story. The gentle lapping of waves against the shore provided a soothing backdrop to the cozy beachfront home in New Zealand. Inside, a man stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sea met the sky. At first glance, he appeared to be George Hamilton, a respected environmental scientist known for his groundbreaking work in climate change adaptation. But beneath this carefully crafted identity lay the truth. This was Zachary Thompson, the man who had vanished without a trace 7 years ago. The past 7 years had transformed Zachary, both inside and out. His once neatly trimmed dark hair now sported distinguished streaks of gray, and laugh lines had begun to form around his eyes. But the most significant change was in his demeanor. The weight of betrayal that had once hunched his shoulders was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence and contentment. As he watched the sun begin its descent towards the horizon, Zachary reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The pain of discovering Lucinda and Morris's betrayal had been excruciating, but it had also been the catalyst for this new life. A life where he was valued not for his family name or his business acumen, but for his intellect and passion for the environment. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft padding of feet behind him. Turning, Zachary's face lit up with a warm smile as he saw Rosemary, his wife of 3 years, enter the room. Rosemary, a marine biologist with a brilliant mind and a kind heart, had been instrumental in helping Zachary heal and rebuild his life. Deep in thought again, love? Rosemary asked, her Australian accent adding a musical lilt to her words. She crossed the room to join him at the window, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her swollen belly. Zachary placed his hand over hers, marveling at the life growing within. Just thinking about how far we've come, he replied, his voice soft with wonder. Sometimes it feels like a dream. Rosemary leaned into him, her presence a comforting anchor. It's real, George. We're real. The use of his assumed name no longer felt strange to Zachary. George Hamilton was as much a part of him now as Zachary Thompson had ever been. Perhaps even more so, for George was the man he had chosen to become, unburdened by the betrayals of the past. As they stood there, basking in the warmth of the setting sun and each other's company, the sharp trill of Zachary's phone cut through the peaceful atmosphere. With an apologetic smile to Rosemary, he retrieved the device from his pocket. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, with a United States area code. Frowning slightly, Zachary answered, "George Hamilton speaking." The voice on the other end was official, detached. "Mr. Hamilton, this is Thomas Reeves from the U.S. State Department. I'm calling regarding Zachary Thompson." Zachary's heart skipped a beat, but years of practice kept his voice steady. "I'm afraid I don't know anyone by that name. May I ask what this is about?" There was a pause on the other end then. "I apologize for the confusion, Mr. Hamilton. We're reaching out to individuals who may have had connections to Mr. Thompson in the past. He's been officially declared dead by the U.S. government as of today." The words hit Zachary like a physical blow. He had known this day would come eventually, had even planned for it, but the reality of it was still shocking. I see," he managed to say. "That's unfortunate news." May I ask what happened? Mr. Thompson disappeared during a severe storm 7 years ago. After exhaustive searches and investigations, and with no sign of him for all these years, the court has finally declared him legally dead. Zachary murmured appropriate words of sympathy and understanding, his mind racing. As he ended the call, he turned to find Rosemary watching him with concern. "What is it, love?" she asked, moving to his side. Zachary took a deep breath, trying to process the surreal nature of the situation. "I've just been declared officially dead," he said, a hint of dark humor coloring his tone. Rosemary's eyes widened, understanding the implications immediately. She had known Zachary's full story from the beginning, had accepted and loved him despite, or perhaps because of, his complex past. "How do you feel about that?" she asked gently. Zachary considered the question carefully. "Relieved, I think," he said finally. "It feels like the final page of that chapter of my life has been turned. Zachary Thompson is truly gone now." Rosemary nodded, her hand finding his and squeezing gently. "And George Hamilton is here to stay," she affirmed. As the reality of the situation sank in, Zachary found himself reflecting on the path that had led him here. The pain, the betrayal, the careful planning of his disappearance. It had all led to this moment. He was free, truly free, to live this new life he had built. But as he stood there, holding Rosemary's hand and feeling the movement of their unborn child, a knock at the door shattered the moment of peace. It was a sharp, insistent sound that seemed to echo through the house. Zachary and Rosemary exchanged puzzled glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and their home was quite isolated, chosen specifically for its privacy. "I'll get it," Zachary said, giving Rosemary's hand a reassuring squeeze before moving towards the door. As he reached for the handle, a sense of foreboding washed over him. Something about the timing, coming so soon after the call declaring him legally dead, felt ominous. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Zachary opened the door. The sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. Standing on his doorstep, looking haggard and desperate, was a face he had never expected to see again. A face that belonged to a past he thought he had left behind forever. Lucinda. Time seemed to stand still as Zachary stared at the woman on his doorstep. Lucinda, once the picture of elegance and poise, now looked like a shadow of her former self. Her once lustrous blonde hair hung limp and unkempt, and dark circles underlined her bloodshot eyes. The years had not been kind to her, etching deep lines of worry and hardship into her once flawless face. "Zachary," Lucinda gasped, her voice a mixture of disbelief and desperation. "I can't believe. We need your help. Christy's in trouble." For a moment, Zachary was transported back in time. The sound of Lucinda's voice, once so familiar and beloved, now sent a chill down his spine. He gripped the doorframe tightly, anchoring himself in the present, in his identity as George Hamilton. His eyes narrowed as he regarded her coldly. "How did you find me?" he demanded, his voice low and controlled. Lucinda waved her hand dismissively, her eyes wild with urgency. "That doesn't matter," she pleaded. "Christy's in jail. She needs bail money. It's your fault. You abandoned us." The accusation hit Zachary like a slap in the face. Anger, long suppressed and carefully controlled, bubbled up inside him. He let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and unfamiliar even to his own ears. "I abandoned you," he spat, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I abandoned a woman who was having an affair with my brother and a child that isn't mine." With swift, decisive movements, Zachary reached into a nearby drawer and pulled out a folder. He threw it at Lucinda's feet, papers spilling out onto the doorstep. Among them was a copy of the DNA test results he had obtained all those years ago. "It's not my problem," he said coldly. "Get lost." Lucinda crumpled to her knees, gathering the scattered papers with trembling hands. As she read the DNA results, her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, Zach," she sobbed, using the name he had long since discarded. "We've lost everything. Maurice is in prison for embezzlement. I'm barely staying afloat. Christy, she's all I have left." For a brief moment, Zachary felt a flicker of pity. The sight of Lucinda, once so proud and confident, reduced to this desperate state was jarring. But then he remembered the pain of her betrayal, the years of lies and deceit, and his heart hardened once more. "You made your choices," he said, his voice cold and final. "Now live with them." As Lucinda continued to plead and sob on his doorstep, Zachary became aware of movement behind him. Rosemary had come to investigate the commotion. He felt her presence at his side, a source of strength and support. "George," she asked quietly, her voice tinged with concern. "What's going on?" The use of his new name seemed to snap Zachary back to the present. He was no longer the betrayed husband, the abandoned father. He was George Hamilton, environmental scientist, loving husband, and soon-to-be father. "It's all right, love," he said to Rosemary, his voice softening as he addressed her. "This is someone from my past. She was just leaving." Lucinda looked up at the sound of the unfamiliar voice, her tear-stained face a mask of confusion as she took in the sight of the pregnant woman standing protectively at Zachary's side. "Zach," she whispered, her voice small and lost. Who is this?" Zachary squared his shoulders, drawing strength from Rosemary's presence. "This is my wife, Rosemary," he said firmly. "And my name is George now. Zachary Thompson is dead. He died the day he discovered your betrayal." The finality in his tone seemed to crush what little hope Lucinda had left. She slumped further, her sobs quieting to soft, defeated whimpers. "Please," she tried one last time. "If not for me, then for Christy. She's innocent in all this." For a moment, Zachary's resolve wavered. Despite everything, he had loved Christy as his own for 14 years. The thought of her in trouble, in jail, pulled at something deep within him. But then he remembered the years of lies, the fact that Christy had never truly been his, and he steeled himself once more. "Christy has her real father to turn to," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I'm sure Maurice can help from prison. After all, that's where all the money you stole ended up, isn't it?" Lucinda flinched at his words, the truth of them clearly striking home. She looked up at Zachary, really seeing him for the first time since she had arrived. She saw not the man she had betrayed, but a stranger, confident, resolved, and completely beyond her reach. "You've changed," she whispered, a note of wonder in her voice. Zachary nodded, his arm instinctively wrapping around Rosemary's waist. "Yes, I have," he agreed. "I've become the man I was always meant to be. Without you. Without your lies and betrayal." As Lucinda struggled to her feet, her movements slow and defeated, Zachary felt a sense of closure washing over him. This confrontation, as unexpected and painful as it was, felt like the final act in a play that had been running for far too long. "You should leave, Lucinda," he said firmly. "You have no place in my life anymore." Lucinda took a step back, her eyes moving between Zachary and Rosemary, taking in the life he had built without her. As she turned to go, her shoulders slumped in defeat, Zachary felt compelled to add one final thing. "And Lucinda," he called after her, "don't come back. Ever." As Lucinda's figure retreated down the path, growing smaller in the fading light, Zachary felt the last vestiges of his old life retreating with her. He turned to Rosemary, seeing understanding and love in her eyes, and knew that whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them together. As Lucinda's defeated form disappeared from view, Zachary felt a complex mix of emotions washing over him. There was anger, yes, at the audacity of her appearance and her demands. But there was also a sense of vindication, a feeling that justice had finally been served. Rosemary's gentle touch on his arm brought him back to the present. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Zachary took a deep breath, centering himself. "I am," he said, surprising himself with the truth of the statement. "I really am." They retreated back into the house, closing the door on Lucinda and the past she represented. As they settled on the couch, Rosemary's presence a comforting warmth beside him, Zachary found himself compelled to explain, to share the full story with the woman who had become his rock, his safe harbor. "I never told you the whole story," he began, his voice soft but steady. "About how I uncovered all their lies and schemes before I disappeared." Rosemary listened intently as Zachary recounted the details of his investigation, the private detective he had hired, the shocking revelations about the embezzlement and Christie's paternity. He explained how he had meticulously gathered evidence, building an ironclad case against Lucinda and Maurice. "I left all the evidence for the authorities," he revealed, a hint of satisfaction creeping into his voice. "I made sure they would face the consequences of their actions, even if I wasn't there to see it." Rosemary's eyes widened as she absorbed the information. So Maurice being in prison, Lucinda losing everything. That was all because of the evidence you left behind? Zachary nodded, a smile playing on his lips. Their downfall was their own doing. I just made sure the truth came to light. As he spoke, Zachary felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For years, he had carried the burden of this secret, the knowledge of how he had ensured justice would be served. Sharing it with Rosemary, seeing understanding and support in her eyes, felt like the final step in leaving his past behind. "You're a remarkable man, George Hamilton," Rosemary said softly, using his new name with purpose. "The strength it must have taken to walk away, to build this new life. I'm in awe of you." Zachary felt a rush of love and gratitude for this woman who had accepted him, past and all. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her swollen belly. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said earnestly. "You gave me a reason to truly live again, not just exist." As they sat there, the sun setting outside their window, painting the room in warm hues, Zachary felt a profound sense of closure. Lucinda's appearance, as shocking as it had been, had served to reinforce just how far he had come, how much he had gained. "It's over," he said softly, more to himself than to Rosemary. "Let's focus on our family now." Rosemary smiled, understanding the weight of the moment. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. Together, she agreed, her voice filled with love and promise. As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon, Zachary felt a mix of vindication and relief wash over him. He had not only survived the betrayal that had shattered his world 7 years ago, but he had thrived. He had created a new life filled with love, purpose, and the promise of a future brighter than he could have ever imagined. The storm of his past had finally cleared, leaving behind a landscape of possibility. As he looked at Rosemary, at the evidence of their growing family, Zachary knew that the best was yet to come. He had weathered the tempest of betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and happier on the other side. With a contented sigh, Zachary pulled Rosemary closer, reveling in the warmth of her presence. The ghosts of his past had been laid to rest, justice had been served, and now, finally, he could fully embrace the future that lay before him. As they closed the door on Lucinda and the past she represented, Zachary and Rosemary turned towards their bright, promising future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.